Okay, so today we're going to be explaining the Phrygian mode. What does it mean exactly? Let's take all the white keys. We're going to say E Phrygian, the notes of C major. So we start out with E. First, I'm going to speak of all the notes in the key melodically, and then I'm going to talk about all the chords in the key harmonically, so we have some structure to this video. E is the primal root, unadulterated, and the root, the tonic of any key, symbolizes the self, the big S, self. And this is a little subjective, synesthesia, but the E note is green in its resonance, but in this key it is a darker green. And the main thing to know is it represents the self. Before any other notes are added, the tonic is always the self. And now F is the minor second of the key. It is a deep orange color, and it represents virtually the Israelites in slavery and in toil in Egypt before they left on the Exodus. This is the Israelites under Pharaoh in Egypt. And this could also be, if you want to get scientific rather than literary, you could say it is the early dinosaurs struggling to evolve their form and consciousness. It is earthly, ignorant, clouded toil as a prerequisite for illumination. The G note of this mode is the minor third. It is man's leap into consciousness, but with a willingness towards war and conquest, as this is the first thing that seems obvious to man. And man's godhood is still veiled from man, and it is violet like royalty, and in a way it is Oedipal tyranny, and that the people are not necessarily tyrannized by, say, an empire, but they're unknowingly tyrannized by the nature that they're ignorant to. A is the fourth note of the E Phrygian scale, and it is red like Mars, but not the red of war, but the red of desolation, the red of the desolation of Mars. And there is an emptiness and there is a space to the A note, as if this Phrygian trajectory is seen. You come to a point where you're unable to see God, yet you keep moving. It's almost, you have a nihilistic sense about you when you can't see the Christ principle all around you. But yet God is still there. Yet the Christ principle is the undercurrent of all being. B is the fifth. It is blue as wisdom is. It is pure as a fifth in this key, because in any mode you take the tonic, you take the root, and you take the fifth. It's always a pure relationship. No matter what mode you go into, it's generally very pure relationship. And B, in this Phrygian context, it is man's apotheosis and the acceptance of the I am, but it might be slightly unconscious. It might be a glimpse. War is transcended because the all itself is known as victorious, but it took unnecessary toil, unnecessary warring to get here. Christ comes to earth with the misunderstood horrors of the Revelation story. And this B-note, it really buys into the fear aspect of when you read Revelation. C, melodically, is the golden mystic note. It is the minor six. It is the alchemical note that is able to transcend the gloom of the mode. It sets things in righteous order seamlessly. But to do this, there is an acknowledgement and there is a solemn stoicism to do it. It is comparable to Cain's curse in the Old Testament, because Cain's curse is both a blessing and a curse. Cain is cursed in that he has to live knowing it's like, I killed my brother. You have to live with that. That's a certain psychological truth about the Bible. That's a certain psychological truth about so-called sin. But the blessing Cain gets is he does get a lesson from killing his brother, and he's kind of protected by God for taking the L. Cain takes the L. Cain takes the lesson. D is the minor seven of this mode. It is a deep, solid brown color. Its whole step octave resolution often represents a repeat of the karmic cycle, which is kind of why this key has a very gloomy feel. And in this Phrygian mode, you catch glimpses of Christ, yet you have not really consciously accepted Christ fully. And its dominant melodic function is the veiling of the hypothetical major seventh you might see in other scales, even the minor scale too. It can be in a minor scale. The major seventh can be. When you see the dominant seventh, when you see minor sevenths, it is to point out that the octave might deliberately be achieved in an egoistic fashion and not a completely, quote unquote, pure, aligned fashion. And this all is well for all in creation as well. You can take the egotistic path, but just wait till you get to a scale that has a major seventh, then try that. I know that's a lot to take in, but I'm reading off my notes. I give this to you exactly how I see it. So it might be kind of poetic in a way. It might be kind of jumping from concept to concept, but just take it all in and get the feeling of what I am saying about these chords and notes. And yeah, now we are going to go on to the chords of E Phrygian. E minor, it is the feminine tonic, in that life is wrought both from and unto Mother Nature. Life comes from Mother Nature and life comes into Mother Nature. It's a paradox. All spiritual truths are paradoxes. Like I said, E, let's take the chord. We have E, G, and B. E is the self, like I had said. G, this note in the chord, represents the self's reliance or frustration with the mother, with nature. And the B note of this chord, as fifth, it represents the underlying, maybe unseen, Christ principle guiding consciousness along. Next we have F major, the major 2 chord of this mode. And it is the masculine assertive force that propels man's antiqual expansion. Masculine because, obviously, major chord. And this chord represents the early empires and their passionate sunset waves. The empires come in waves, then one dies off, another one comes in waves, then Genghis Khan comes. And this chord, it is the bones and the sands and the swelter of civilization. F is group consciousness itself. A is the agreeance on the unity of that consciousness. And sometimes that might even be unconsciously done. And C of this chord is the will that drives the evolution of group consciousness. FAC. G major is the major 3 of this mode, and it is man's coming into greater awareness. It is the violet of Rome. It is the simultaneous tyranny and democracy of the whole Mediterranean area. You have Greece, you have Rome, you have democracy, you have tyrannies. And this alludes to why this key can't seem to serve 2 masters. Because man and the G major chord of E Phrygian becomes exalted of himself, and the ego solidifies for both better and for worse. G is man's solidified ego here. B is its justification. For the most loving thing is that all should be. That's what a big part of the Christ principle. And the D note of the G chord is virtually the Jungian shadow that is cast and unconscious of by the ego. Now we got A minor. This is the 4 minor chord. And this is comparable to the fall of Rome or the fall of the Titanic. And here, that collective shadow that I just talked about of the G chord, it disintegrates the attachments of that ego. You know, the ego builds up and then it gets too arrogant and it's going to lose it. And this is, like I said, the desolation of Mars. And the earth is the red phoenix on its death day, seemingly void. You don't know whether that phoenix is going to get back up again. It's just dead for a second. So within the chord, the A minor chord, A, C, E, A is the shadow. C is the logos power that allows the shadow to teach man. And E is the self, the higher self, witnessing the lesson through the lower self. B is the diminished 5. And this is, as far as I know, it's the only mode that has a diminished 5 chord. That makes this mode honestly fun to play in on guitar, really, because resolving from a diminished 5 back to that E minor, it's just a interesting resolution. Play with it a little bit. But it is, think of the B diminished 7 chord. I'm going to lay this out in colors. It is, the B is the blue, deep blue, but it's blazing with a blood red of its 7th, which is the A, and it has an orange fire to it, which is the 5th of the B diminished chord. And it has the browns of warring trebuchets set up. This is the D note of this B diminished chord. And this is the chord of war within this context. It's not always war in other modes, but within the Phrygian context, it is war. And Christ is with either party that is warring against each other. Yet, one party or both parties may ignore Christ, and Nero will be playing his violin out in the streets. And the story of Revelation almost must occur out of sheer providence. Being unaware of the so-called karmic cycle will just lead you straight into the Revelation story. And this chord, B, is Christ. D is the willful ignorance of the Christ principle. And F is man's mutual war within himself of his higher and lower selves. The C major chord, the major 6th chord of this mode, it is the golden salvation of the long-told 144,000. And don't take that number too literally. Just take it as a symbolic number. It represents completeness, unity in some aspect. The C major chord in the E Phrygian context, it is the transmutation of the world into the reign of heaven. And it is deliverance from this world of flesh, this world of illusion. It's not necessarily enlightenment. It is a higher force being graceful. So we have C, E, G in this chord. C is the wisdom working with the logos. E is the self. And G is the expanded self, risen from grace, risen from the wisdom of that logos. And finally, we have the minor 7 of the mode. D minor, like I said, it's a deep brown color. Deep brown is a church door. It is seemingly the locked gate to heaven. And this wood is thick, and you knock upon the door, and you do get an answer, but you can't seem to understand an answer that is silent. You can't understand an answer that is silent. So D, we have DFA. D is the cloud of unknowing. F is man who has not accepted the Christ principle. And A is the solemn, bittersweet acceptance of the quote-unquote repeat of the karmic cycle. So now we come full circle, all the way back to E minor. We have the whole mode of E Phrygian. Shout out Bang, sponsor me. So when you can actually see the whole mode laid out completely, it becomes less of a gloomy mode, and you almost see a more optimistic side of the mode, because you can kind of see where, quote unquote, the mode goes wrong. It doesn't really go wrong. It's just a different path. And acknowledging the full context of the mode, you can play within it, and you can kind of get the more romanticized effect of it. And the feminine keys and the minor keys, there often is more romanticism, and you definitely see that here. But not to bore you, tell me what you would like me to make a video on next. Thank you.